happy to answer them.
It's not coexistence and tolerance.
Peaceful coexistence and tolerance can be arguably the same. The good thing about that is that it can forge a relationship that builds toward the transformation that goes beyond just tolerance. In other words, I think that people can peacefully coexist. You and I can get along, Regent Davis. We can get along, but we never necessarily have to have a conversation with each other. But we can retort and say that we get along. As long as you don't get in my face, I don't get in your face, we peacefully coexist. You see what I'm saying? But part of the limitation and the problem with that is that when people peacefully coexist, that they subsume that their values are not as important as the other group or person whose values are, that they might in some kind of relative way assume to be equally as important. When you're talking about the transformation of society, that peaceful coexistence really is part of a developmental process toward the transformation of a society. And the only way you transform a society is that you have to engage the society. You have to do more with the people that you're living in that same space with. And so I appreciate that question, but yeah, I think that peaceful coexistence in a lot of ways is equivalent. But I think that it requires of our human condition and humanity to go farther if we are to survive and thrive with each other.
Can you explain your incrementalism, where you said it may be functional and idealized system?
Yeah. Incrementalism. Yeah. What I mean, and thanks for asking that, because what I mean by incrementalism is that society is not noticed for its dramatic transformations. That oftentimes what happens in society, particularly when we're talking about the rights and parties of individual groups, you think about, for example, the progression of women in our society. That progression was not dramatic. It took a long time. And we still have more work to do, but the point of incrementalism focuses on this ideal that we tend to trickle the progressions of what we think is palatable that the society can take on in general. So what I'm really saying about that, and I'm not necessarily saying that that's an incorrect manner to do it, but I'm saying that what happens is that society sometimes is organized in a way that we're saying, well, we can't give them all of that, because that's going to fundamentally change who they are and what they care about and so forth and so on. And so what do? Is that they trickle the progression among those individuals. You think about our indigenous society as an example, that an indigenous society is a perfect example of how we trickle progression to those native societies. And so incrementalism is depicted at least from that frame of reference. Any other question or thought or comment? Oh, one more question.
I'm walking away from your speech thoughtfully recognizing, thinking, I'm hearing what you're saying, that you got to be careful about people who claim to be change agents. That not all change agents are authentic. Some claim to be. And there's a simple formula I think you presented about knowing, caring, and acting and the coordination between them. But I'm particularly curious about caring. And there was a slide about authentic caring, which presumably had these elements to it. That what does inauthentic caring look like? And how do we know it when we see it?
Inauthentic caring. What's unique about inauthentic caring is that, first of all, that it presumes to be disconnected from the, it tends to be disconnected from the assumed benefits and progress that an individual or society will reap as a result of being together. So what inauthenticity tends to do is disconnect yourselves from the meaning of who a person is or what a group represents, especially when you disconnect for the purposes of your intended doing harm. That is far, far more difficult for me to do harm to you if I have some meaningful entanglement or connection with you in some broad sense, if you want to be progressive. But what I think that inauthenticity tends to do is to allow me to step back and therefore disconnect myself. And when I disconnect myself, guess what? I can objectify you. I can objectify the situation. And so when it's time for me to act against you, it's a lot easier for me to do it. Why? Because you ain't nothing. Because I've just not made you nothing. You see what I'm saying? I don't know if that helps the question that you raised.
My question is, are you buying coffee tomorrow?
I'm broke, Nick.
So Dr. Crawford, I just want to know, why did the frog get along?
Say that one more time.
Why did the frog get along?
Why did the frog
Get He said, asked you why the frog get along. He forgot.
I'm not,
Why did the frog get along?
L-O-A.
why did, was that one of my? I was going to say, where does that slide come from? Oh, the dean said to ask that question. Why did the frog get along?
One of your jokes, back in the day.
We remember that knowledge. He got along because he had to. But anyway, I know you've got other things to do this afternoon. Thanks very much.